incentive-based. I don't know if you can call them standards, but they're because they're incentive-based. But these are optional for property owners to choose. Of conversation for the steering committee. They're very interested in protecting existing single-family houses. So we have carried forward, again, a provision that's in the town's current nonconformities regulations pertaining to single-family houses that allows, if a single-family house is destroyed by a natural disaster or some other event beyond the owner's reasonable control, the house can be repaired or restored to its pre-event dimensions on the pre-event footprint. And again, this is language from the town's current land development ordinance. The three requirements there are that the house meet all applicable building codes, that it meets or exceeds the regulatory flood protection elevation unless a variance has been granted. And regulatory flood protection elevation is base flood elevation plus freeboard, which right now is an additional foot over base flood elevation. And then if it's an historic house, it also has to receive a certificate of appropriateness in accordance with the code. There's also a provision for houses that are non-conforming with respect to height. So if the house currently exceeds the base zoning district height limit, which in most places is 35 feet, or would exceed that limit after substantial improvement because it's being brought into compliance with that regulatory flood protection elevation, then it can be rebuilt to the greater of either its height at the time of the damage or the base zoning district height plus 1 foot for each 1 foot that the house is elevated above the regulatory flood protection elevation. And this coincides with an incentive that we'll talk about at the end of the presentation that provides sort of that same height and this analysis that we think is helpful as y'all are considering the applicability of these standards. The map shows, and let me blow that up a little bit, I know it's hard to see, the parcels that are shown in pink have a 0 improvement value, so those are essentially vacant parcels. The ones in yellow are under-improved parcels, so they have less than 30% improvement value as compared to the land value. So these are the parcels that would be most affected by the new overlay district because they are either undeveloped or largely undeveloped. So getting into the specific standards, we'll start with allowed uses. I'll do the easy one first. The CRM subdistrict, the allowed uses are specified by the lot's base zoning district. So this overlay, so you'll still have a base zoning district on a parcel, and this overlay is an additional layer of regulations on top of it. So any regulations that aren't addressed in the overlay kind of default to the base zoning district. So for allowed uses, CRM uses are as specified by the base zoning district. In the NIZ, that is also the case. They're specified by the base zoning district, except that the overlay district prohibits new critical facilities and new residential uses other than detached single-family houses. And we'll talk about both of those real quick. This is the proposed definition of critical facilities, and I'll try to paraphrase. Basically, we are talking about principal uses of land. These are things that are essential for the delivery of vital services, protecting the community, recovering from a storm or other natural disaster. So as it's currently drafted, this is the list of critical facilities. This is an exclusive list. It's not such as, but not limited to. This is the list. It includes a few utilities: water supply facilities, wastewater treatment facilities, power substations, and natural gas gate stations. This specifically excludes wastewater pump and lift stations. It doesn't include, water lines or sewer lines going to individual houses. This is water treatment plants, large, again, principal use facilities. It also prohibits telecommunications towers unless there's no feasible alternative location for the towers. We took a look at existing residential development in the NIZ just to inform this proposed prohibition of residential uses other than single family. Using the tax assessor's code, which we may have missed a few things, but we believe it's approximately 85 parcels in the NIZ with essentially townhouse and multifamily uses. Now, there are a lot more dwelling units than this. This is just number of parcels, because an apartment complex, for example, maybe all one parcel. So this is just to start to give you a sense of what this means in terms of the effect on existing properties. The overlay district also limits residential density in the CR-NIZ subdistrict to 5 dwelling units per acre, and this is approximately an R8 zoning district size lot, about 8,000 square feet, a little bit more. The intent is to limit the number of people and structures in that high hazard area. The steering committee also raised the possibility of using a different metric to regulate density, such as bedrooms per acre, which may more effectively limit the number of people that live in that particular area. And just again, for some context, we looked around at different neighborhoods and areas of town to give you all a sense of what 5 dwelling units per acre looks like. And this area downtown, this block bounded by Cedar, Marsh, Pine, and Pollock, is about 4.5 dwelling units per acre. There's a vacant lot that could probably be subdivided, and I think one building on the corner may at one time have been commercial, but just generally this is what 4.5 to 5 units per acre looks like. So the next standard is impervious surface limit. Different standards in the NIZ versus the moderate hazard subdistrict, and also different standards for residential versus non-residential uses. It's more restrictive in the NIZ, 30% for residential, 50% for non-residential. Moderate hazard subdistrict, it's 40% and 60%. The historic business district and historic waterfront business district, as well as the R8A zoning district, are exempt from this requirement altogether, as are developments that require a stormwater permit issued by NCDEQ. And this is another area where the committee was very cognizant of the impact of these new regulations on detached single-family houses. So they are limited to the greater of that percentage, either 30% or 40% depending on the subdistrict, or 2,500 square feet, just to make sure that all single-family lot owners have at least 2,500 square feet of impervious surface area on their lot, or can have up to 2,500 square feet. The steering committee reviewed an informal impervious surface analysis to help visualize these percentages. This was, we did a bit of a GIS analysis and calculated the existing impervious surface coverage, at least as far as we could tell using aerial photos, on some lots all around town, some in the NIZ, some in the moderate hazard subdistrict, and some properties outside of both of those districts. And we found an average of about 36% for residential uses, residential lots, and about 58% for non-residential. Again, it's a small sample size. It was only 31 lots, but it was really more just meant to be illustrative rather than a statistical analysis of existing impervious surfaces in the town. So shoreline management, this is one of the standards that is the same in both sub-districts, and it allows an existing hardened shoreline to remain in place and be partially or fully replaced if it doesn't move by more than 2 feet either landward or waterward. And then there's a should, that property owners should not convert existing natural shorelines to hardened shorelines. Typically, we don't use should language in a regulatory document because if it's a should, it's not required, so why include it? But we wanted to leave it in to encourage folks to maintain existing natural shorelines where they can. But because the camera plan calls for or recommends that the town complete a shoreline management plan, staff and the consultant team felt like it was best to reconsider this regulation once the shoreline management plan is done, because shoreline hardening really is the best solution in certain instances. So we didn't want to just have a blanket requirement that you couldn't create new hardened shorelines. We have two requirements related to planting along a shoreline. We had originally proposed a shoreline buffer, and after some in-depth conversations with the steering committee and some concerns with the effect of implementing a buffer on small lots and certain commercial lots, that might be too onerous. So what's proposed in the draft is a shoreline buffer, which we'll talk about next, and a shoreline planting area. This particular requirement applies to lots zoned R8A, BW, HBD, and HWBD that have frontage along a natural water body. Does not require the property owner to do anything, but when a landowner chooses to plant vegetation within 20 feet of the mean high water line, the overlay requires that it is native to North Carolina and selected from the acceptable plant list that is in the overlay district and also applies in the shoreline buffer. So obviously with the shoreline buffer, we're exempting the lots that are subject to the shoreline planting area. We're also exempting a few uses, specific uses: marinas, water-dependent marine research facilities, working docks, and airports. So this is a requirement to have a natural or planted buffer that is at least 20 feet in width along the shoreline. It does allow for removal of invasive species. It does allow for limited uses like pedestrian walkways or vehicular access ways to a dock or a boat landing. And it prohibits impervious surfaces and walls except for erosion control structures. Low impact development is another requirement that, again, is the same in both sub-districts, and it is only required if the development is subject to the town's stormwater regulations, which I can't remember, Michelle, is that properties over 1 acre or 2 acres? Over. So it'd be properties that are greater than an acre. And the overlay district requires at least 2 low impact development techniques that manage at least 50% of the development site's peak flow. So these are things like bioretention cells. They have to be designed, installed, and maintained in accordance with DEQ's Stormwater Design Manual. Now we're getting into the two topics that are optional and incentive-based. The first is stormwater retrofits. This offers incentives for developed lots that, if they were undeveloped today, they would be subject to the town's stormwater requirements, but don't currently meet the standards in that chapter. So these are probably lots that were developed before the town had stormwater regulations, or maybe those regulations have changed. The only requirement is that the techniques are appropriate for the site and serve to incrementally increase compliance with Chapter 54. So this is a list of the improvements and their associated incentives. So they are, several of them allow an increase in the maximum impervious surface coverage. A couple allow a reduction in the width of the shoreline buffer. The first two, if you're essentially adding vegetation, installing rain gardens, that vegetation can count towards any landscaping that's required on the site. For example, if you have a commercial development, there may be landscaping required in the buffer or along the building foundation, and this could count towards that. The biggest incentive is the one at the bottom, that if a property is brought into full compliance with the town's current stormwater regulations and the development is subject to site plan review, that final approval can be granted during a joint meeting of these two boards, which saves a property owner or developer a little bit of time in the development review process. The last topic is increased construction standards. This offers incentives for new development and redevelopment, and these are cumulative. So if you comply with 3 of these, you get to add all 3 incentives together. All of these allow an increase in impervious surface coverage. The only one that's different, is the very top one there, and we talked a little bit at the very beginning about the provision that allows non-conforming single-family houses a little bit of increase in height, and that ties directly to this first one that's listed. So if new construction, if the principal structure is elevated above the regulatory flood protection elevation, the maximum height of the structure can be increased by 1 foot for each 1 foot the structure is elevated above that flood protection elevation, up to a maximum of 3 feet. And that essentially only applies in the NIZ subdistrict because those are the only areas of the overlay district where there is a base flood elevation. And with that, I will quickly go through what's next. So this is a more complete Module 1 schedule. You see the additional outreach we did in June. That was general outreach for the UDO. We have the in-person and virtual panel Q&A that the mayor mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. And then we anticipate making any revisions to the overlay district that you all suggest tonight, taking that to the planning board on September 15th, and then bringing it back to you all on October 27th. In the meantime, staff is doing a little bit more outreach in October at a town event, and we are planning to meet with the steering committee again in mid-October. We are starting to draft our next topic for Module 1, which is trees, landscaping, and buffer yards. Okay. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you all have.
Okay, well, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that good overview. And we'll go ahead and take questions from the planning board or the commissioners, and I'm just going to let you guys kind of jump in, try not to jump over everybody. Anybody would like to start? Yes, Commissioner Steele.
Thank you, Kelly. That was a really great presentation. Appreciate it. Are we going to get a copy of these slides?
Sure, we're happy to make those available to you.
Would it be possible to get them before the meeting tomorrow night?
Absolutely.
Okay, and would the public be able to see them before tomorrow night?
Sure, we will post it to the Conveyor website.
Great, okay, thank you. Well, y'all have done a really great job, and I've had the opportunity to sit in on a lot of the UDO steering committee meetings, and the discussions have been really great, so I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been a part of that. A quick question, and sorry if I missed this. So for the shoreline buffers, those are 20 feet from the water. Is there also a setback in the coastal resilience overlay zone about how far you have to have your house built back from the water?
No, essentially it would be that minimum 20 feet because the shoreline buffer prohibits impervious surfaces within that 20 feet. So that it effectively makes that a 20-foot setback. A lot of the, or if not most of the residential zoning districts require a 25-foot rear setback, so there wouldn't be an impact on every lot. It wouldn't increase the setback on existing lots.
So for new single-family residential homes in the NIZ, because that's what would be allowed, they would have to build at least 20 feet from the water. Do you think that's enough in that zone? And I'm just asking, is that pretty standard, or?
I'm sorry? Oh, that's right. There is a 30-foot CAMA buffer, so that's going to apply as well. So that would push, can they do impervious surfaces? Okay.
So in the NIZ, if you're building a new single-family home, it would have to be at least 30 feet from the water, is that correct? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with any further questions? Mr. Sancio?
Just a couple. When you're talking about rebuilding a home that was damaged, and you said that it had to be built to the same dimensions, if they're on a larger lot if they're on a large lot, why can't they build back to the lot standards or requirements, setback requirements?
Sure, they could. This is for houses that are non-conforming, so houses that exceed the impervious surface coverage or don't meet setback requirements.
Okay, thank you. And I may have missed this, but are sewer extensions allowed in the NIZ?
Yes, there's nothing that prohibits sewer extensions.
Okay.
The prohibition is like wastewater treatment facilities as a principal use. Exactly.
Thank you very much. The density of 5 units an acre, was there any discussion about whether or not you could include townhomes?
The committee's recommendation was detached, single-family.
Okay. Can you explain why?
I would defer to our members, there are three out of our 4 members who are here for their rationale on that.
Anybody?
I think the intent was to limit density in vulnerable areas. So I think, that was,
But you could build townhouses, a typical townhouse development might be, say, 7 or 8 units an acre, generally. But you could build townhouses under that density just by building less townhouses.
you could, and I wouldn't want to make any assumptions about patterns of development here, but typically, the townhomes would be put as close to the water as possible in the most vulnerable area, using the less vulnerable area towards the density requirements. And I think this would prevent gaming the system. It's fairly straightforward. It would keep people from taking a big lot and sticking all their density down in the vulnerable areas, and then pointing to the upland areas and saying, well, there's our, that meets our requirements.
But if the question is density,
Density is the mechanism, not the
of
goal.
course, I hate the word density myself, but I just don't understand, you could build a home that might be the size of 2 townhomes put together.
2 townhomes would potentially affect 2 families, whereas a single large home might just affect a single family. So I think that the goal was to
So is
put
it
fewer families in harm's way. I think that
I
was.
wonder if we can just kind of think about that a little bit.
Okay.
The incentives. Can you tell me how those were developed or determined?
Sure, so, get back to him. Are you talking about kind of both sets in general, or increased construction standards and storm?
Like, for instance, how do you come up with 2% increased density?
Sure, so,
I'm asking, like, are there good examples anywhere that we can hear about?
there's not a ton of examples. Different communities, so what we tried to do was tie the incentive to the cost or the complexity of meeting the particular requirement. So, adding wiring a structure to accommodate a generator is a pretty simple improvement. So that's why that one only has 1%. But 2%, altering the roof form or the strength of the roof, there's more expensive, that's more involved. So that one's got a little bit higher incentive associated with it. So we tried to calibrate the incentive with the requirement. We reviewed some other sort of similar approaches in different communities, interviewed some staff members from different communities, and they said that was one of the biggest challenges in other communities, was coming up with an incentive that was appropriate to the time and expense involved in trying to get those lined up. So this is our attempt to do that, but that's the type of thing that we want to hear from you all and hear from the community. Like, do these make sense? Are these incentives enough to make somebody want to do these particular improvements?
And that's exactly what I wanted to hear, is that you looked at other communities. So thank you very much for that. Sure. And I appreciate all the work that the committee has done.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Commissioner Oliver?
First of all, I'd like to compliment you on the document itself. I found it very easy to read and well-written and very articulate, so I really appreciate the care that's gone into this draft.
Thank you.
I have a couple of specific questions. On your page 5, our page 22 of our handout, on item number 7, it talks about, in the purposes, prepare for effects of anticipated sea level rise. I would like to see that specifically tied to NOAA's measurement, rather than being a little bit less well-defined.
Sure, and I think we talked about that in the context of the goals and vision, so, yep, we will have that.
But that I'd like to see tied down to the NOAA particular area. Another suggestion or question I have, or at least a consideration, and really, Ryan, this is, I think, more your team than anything else, but on their page 15 or page 32, which gets into the various acceptabilities and so on, this is going to, by necessity, drive an emphasis on code officers and enforcement. And I just would urge you to flush that out in your consideration of it, and then again, the planning board will follow you and we'll follow them. But there has to be a notable attention paid to that, and I just want to make sure that we recognize, if you would, from an oversight standpoint, that as we do this thing, we're blending some costs and staffing that we need to think about, anticipate, and budget. I come back on George's deal, which is your page 20, our page 37 and 38, having to do with the incentives. I would urge some maybe third-party, independent, maybe even pricing value of those incentives to figure out, do they make sense? I don't have that ability, but some of the people in the professional building side and who actually do this work, Vic, who has a lot of experience, can probably hit that within an hour percentage. I would just review those incentives to make sure that the values have some relationship to what the perception of the incentive is.
Sure, and we did that to some extent. The town's building inspector gave us some comments and feedback on just sort of general costs, like this particular approach is, that's really expensive. That would probably be cost prohibitive for folks. So we did vet that through him. And I know the committee members had some examples of work, either, estimates they had for work at their own house or in their professional.
I would just take a little extra time and go out to somebody who's actually in the business and gets paid to price things.
Sure.
To tie that in.
Okay.
The other question on your page 2, our page 19, and if I could, Ari, this is really aimed at you, more than the consultants, but there's a lot going on in the legislature now concerning efforts or potential efforts by municipalities to downzone. And I'm not in any way suggesting this, but we're spending a hell of a lot of money on this effort. Should we hesitate? Should we wait for what's going to happen at the legislature, and what's it going to do to affect this? Soothsayer.
Well, I don't know.
We don't either, that's my point.
And your consultants and planning staff had a series of very good footnotes on this topic throughout the presentation, which I thought were spot on. You certainly could hit pause waiting for the General Assembly to hurry up and fix this mess. That would not be my recommendation. We may very well have to tweak or adjust some of the substantive provisions to meet the law as it exists now, but I think I would use the word best case or aspirational at this point for what we want to do. This is what the town wants to do, of course, subject to further input and discussions, and if the General Assembly does not act, then we may have to pivot on some of the discrete details. The intelligence that I'm getting out of Raleigh is that any fix on this subject will most likely have to be part of a statewide bill. It'll be a statewide fix and probably embedded in a more omnibus budget type of bill that, you know.
And my sense was also, it's probably not going to be this year, it's probably going to be next year.
As you know, and I think the footnotes cover this with the status of the adjournment of the General Assembly and the limited agenda when they do reconvene between now and the end of the year, I think the prospects for action on the downzoning are pretty limited right now, so we'll most likely be looking into 2026 for it.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And one more thing, if I can, no, not for you, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'll share with you, every time that I've been asked about the NIZ, the first question I get is, what is it? And every time I've gotten that question, I said, well, it's the 100-year floodplain. I would share with you that maybe not only will it be clearer, but also you might get less pushback. And frankly, it might be better understood if it were, instead of using CRNIZ, which we're now going on to a new title, or if you used NIZ, if you just use the 100-year floodplain as a self-defining term, instead of creating the word NIZ and now creating the word CRNIZ, which means the same thing. Because every time somebody asks, they didn't know to ask the CRNIZ until tonight, but every time they've asked the NIZ, I say it's the 100-year floodplain. And somebody says, why don't we just say that? And I think there would be less pushback if you said, well, it's a 100-year floodplain. That's why there's concern about it. To me, it helps define it, and it kind of people, when they hear that it's a 100-year floodplain, they seem to be more sympathetic to understanding why there's some concern, rather than having a term made by an author. So I just, as a general concept, on both of them, I would consider just using the 100-year floodplain and using the X-shaded as the definition, because people seem to catch it much quicker, and I think you'll get less pushback.
Sure, and we use the term NIZ because that's in the CAMA plan, but I understand.
Trust me, I know where it came from. We created it, but again, it might help you, and it might help us.
Sure.
And it might help the community. If we just say, hey, we're talking about the 100-year floodplain, people say, oh, I understand it.
Sure, anything we can do to simplify, make things clearer for everyone, I think is a good change.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor.
Just to clarify, the CRO, Coastal Resilience Overlay, that includes 2 districts, the way you guys have laid it out.
It uses a 100-year floodplain and the X,
Right.
shaded X.
I think that is sort of a planning tool that's done in other places as well. But I hear what Commissioner Oliver is saying, that we could simplify it for the public.
I think the double prong approach, I mean, it's fine to me because I'm on the committee and I understand it, but NIZ explains what we're trying to do, non-intensification zone, because so it gives us the action, like kind of a goal of what we want to do. But I wonder if every time you refer to it, you could put in parentheses, and I know this is a lot, 100-year, I mean, just make it extra clear. That includes the 100-year floodplain.
And it'll help them because, as you know, they are paid by the word.
Yeah, well, I wonder, but if we just call it the 100-year floodplain area of the CRO, then that may also be confusing. So maybe try to state it more and sometimes just double state it when it makes sense. Because I do agree, a lot of people understand it better when you call out the area of the 100-year flood.
Oh, it's, the light comes on.
And is that, a question for y'all, is that, that's more the terms that people use, 100-year and 500-year versus special flood hazard area and shaded X area? The 100-year and 500-year floodplain is the more common.
My understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, NIZ means 100-year floodplain.
Yes, it does, but if you just say 100-year floodplain alone, it doesn't give you the purpose of what we're trying to do, which
I
is,
heard the action part,
Yeah.
yeah. And you could have to go and say, well, we don't want you to build.
Right.
I got you that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I just
I'm
find,
glad you've got it.
I just find every time anybody walks up and says, what's this NIZ? The first words out of their mouth are, what's the 100-year floodplain? Oh.
Makes sense, yeah. Gotcha, okay.
I think part of the question is, are people more familiar with the term 100-year floodplain, or might they be more familiar with AE and BE? Because they know that their property is in.
Some of them do, yeah.
So we may want to consider 100-year versus AE and BE and shaded X, like as we mentioned. But I agree, that makes, and that also makes it clear that it's not the town drawing where this zone is.
Correct.
You know,
Something
we are using
we made up,
We're using someone else's map.
yeah. Technically, I guess what? FEMA. Just simplicity.
So it's a good approach. Anybody else?
I have a separate question.
Okay, Ms. Hunsucker?
Thinking about the list of critical facilities.
I'm going to get you to lean into your mic if you don't mind,
Thinking
please.
of the list of critical facilities, I saw telecommunication towers, and it just seems a little bit vague and ambiguous by stating no feasible alternative. Could we tighten that up a little bit? I don't know, with some rules around what's feasible, not feasible?
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. I know there are federal regulations for those, but I'll let Tyson think through that.
yeah, I remember us having that conversation about telecommunications towers, and if one had to be in a place that didn't make much sense, it would have to be built to federal standards and be very resilient. We just didn't want us to get in a hole and not be able to have telecommunications if needed, but I do see where it is pretty flexible. That statement's pretty flexible. Didn't you have a particular opinion about that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it might be worth talking to an expert in the field to see how flexible they are in placement. I have a feeling that they are pretty flexible in where they're placed, and it shouldn't, it shouldn't cause anyone too much trouble, but I think we did want to leave some sort of out there so we didn't box ourselves in.
Can I ask a question? Are we talking about, feasible alternative to achieve coverage in the area?
That would be my guess, coverage, yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's what I was asking. Is it just says feasible?
Yeah.
Tell me feasible.
We can play with that.
And these, I guess, would be commercial telecommunications towers, like someone's ham radio rig.
Right.
This is in.
Anybody else? You want to go?
Yeah, Kelly, thank you so much for all the time you spent with us. I know we've spent hours in meetings back and forth, a lot of the board members here, plus our team, and had multiple opportunities to kind of weigh in on things, and sometimes things get placed in, and sometimes they don't. And but I know, going back to some of the things that we had talked about, even just basis of what we decided, can you expand on the selection of the lot coverage? I know we've talked about, we had discussions about other communities and lot coverages in other communities, and how we landed, or how the board landed on the 30% in the NIZ and I believe 40% outside for residential. I was kind of vocal on that. I felt like that may have been a little bit low. I wanted to see if we can come up. Currently in our community, we really have, the only lot we have coverage on is R5, and that's at 50%. All the other lots in our community are 8 or 20, have full lot coverage. You can pave the entire thing, which I don't feel that's appropriate, but to land at 30% or 40%, can you explain where that came from?
I can give it a shot. We did look at a number of other communities, mainly in the region, just to see what other folks are doing that are faced with, the same threats and vulnerabilities that Beaufort is. We did that informal impervious surface analysis, which is on the Conveyo website, just to give you all an idea. I think we looked at it a bunch of different ways, NIZ, non-NIZ, residential, non-residential. And I think the committee just arrived at these numbers based on a sense that this was not a huge shift away from what folks already have, but it is starting to put some limits on it. Let's get back. And there was also certainly a concern with small lots, those R8A lots, which is there's a string of, a couple of dozen lots on Front Street, between Front Street and the water, as well as some of the commercial lots in downtown. So I know the committee wanted to recognize and allow for those lots that are existing and sort of contribute to the fabric and the identity of the community to remain as they are. And then again, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. That's an excellent point. And setting them where they are, or where is proposed the 30 to 60%, there are also those incentives for increased construction standards and stormwater retrofits that allow people to kind of increase the impervious surface limits a little bit. So we didn't want to start too high and then sort of pile incentives on top of that. We wanted to give folks an incentive to meet some of those additional construction standards, for example. And then, of course, the committee was very concerned about the effect that this would have on detached single-family houses, which is the reason for that allowance for up to 2,500 square feet of impervious surface, no matter what the lot size is. Hopefully, I captured the committee's intent with that.
So the 2,500 is even overrides the 30%, is that what you're
That's
saying?
correct, yes.
And this just applies for new builds, correct? That's in addition to the 25. What happened in a rebuild scenario?
So, switch to it.
You always get 2,500 is what I'm understanding.
Correct.
You understand?
Yes, it could be more if your lot is bigger.
Right.
Right.
But it's going to be.
Because if you look at our page 5, the 30% residential restriction, and you look at the list that you have on our page 27, it is pretty conservative. It's on the conservative side, so it's on the lower edge of those numbers.
Right.
But the 2,500 does help with
Allowing a base.
allowing a construction.
Sure.
And I think the discussion was, if you have a really small lot, we want you to be able to build a house that you can live in regardless of how, I think that was the intent.
And we also talked about, like a tiered system.
The
And
incentives.
for one example, like, your proximity to some sensitive waterway or something. But we went back to your question about staff capacity and how much trouble it could be. So we were trying to like balance how much staff had to pay attention to, and help people with versus how easy what we're proposing now is to implement. So we did go through some alternatives, but decided they might be too complicated to process through for the homeowner and also staff.
Ms. Hunsaker, I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, this would apply to new development and to existing development that's improved by 50% or more of its value.
So just based on that, just as a question, if there's a lot that's paved fully and there was someone who wanted to develop that lot, would they then be grandfathered into 100% coverage? Or would that be considered no building on the lot, so there is no coverage?
That is a good question. I think, so at the beginning of the overlay district in the applicability section, so this is page 6 of 23 of the overlay, at least in my version here, applicability, so it's C4, it describes it describes that and refers to replacement value of existing principal structures. So I would say that they wouldn't be grandfathered in at 100%, but I can see where that might be unclear from the way that it's drafted, and that might be something that we should clarify.
Okay.
Yes, sir?
John, are you done?
No, I have other questions, but go ahead. If you're asking something based on that, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that in many communities, if an entire lot or a portion of a lot is impervious, you do get credit for it. I mean, in larger communities, Raleigh, Durham, a number of different communities, you do get credit for what is already paved or impervious. That doesn't mean we have to do that.
Yeah,
It needs to be clear.
it needs to be explicit in the documentation so that there's no ambiguity.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important for people to understand what this document means and how it can affect them moving forward. So, if you have a single-family home right now and you wanted to put an addition in, you can go ahead and go down to Town Hall and get your permit. But based on this, if this goes through in this particular, writing here, in this language, you may not be able to put an addition on your home based on lot coverage and so forth. I was also concerned even for existing businesses in the community, because there's really not a lot of protection for some existing businesses who may have their building in the NIZ or even their parking area and so forth, that if there was damage to that building, that they would not be able to build back in a similar manner. They may have to raise the building or conform to standards or tear a parking lot and so forth to put in those types of things. So I think business owners should be aware, and they should be, voice their concerns if there are any concerns out there regarding that as well.
Very specific feedback, it's like when we talk about the requirement to comply with new impervious surface requirements. Is there a discussion to have on that or direction from the board or the board in terms of what you would like to see in terms of the ability to build back a fully paved lot or come into partial compliance?
My concern has always been with people who have existing structures or existing buildings, that we shouldn't create an undue hardship on them. That they've been here, they've been contributing to our community for years, and to then, put that hardship on them after the fact, especially after a storm of something like that, or that nature, where they're in the middle of trying to rebuild, that it creates an undue hardship. So I was kind of against not putting in a provision for that. But that's something that the board can still discuss.
I think it's probably good to point out that this does specifically exempt historic business district and the historic waterfront business district. But I think if there are specific examples of businesses or homes that are in a situation that it would create an undue hardship, that's probably worth bringing to the attention so we can kind of cut out an exemption.
Did you have a comment, anybody else?
Got one more quickie.
I still have some more.
Well, you said, okay.
I got a list.
I was going to list, I'm sorry. Just call when you're done.
I know we had even discussed prohibition of critical facilities in our, in the NIZ of the 100-year flood zone. We don't really have specific language that addresses the additions, such as, like, say, if West Carter, East Carteret, it's not in the NIZ, it's not in, if East Carteret were to want to add on or so forth, correct?
The high school?
But it's not in the town limits, right?
It's not in town limits.
No, there's west.
But do we want to allow, I'm sorry, do we want to allow for additions to those facilities? I mean, we do have additions in our community, maybe even the town of Beaufort. We also have to be cognizant of town of Beaufort facilities, and if we did want to add on to something with the NIZ. If that facility is existing, we maybe want to grandfather it as well.
I think the way that it's drafted, if the addition was less than 50% of the replacement value of the structure, that it would be allowed. But again, that's something that we can make more explicit, if that's the will of the board.
And that's at 50% of the value at the time of the addition.
Correct.
So both the Beaufort Elementary and Beaufort Middle, I don't believe either of those are in the NIZ. I'm trying to think of other, they are not. And believe where we are putting the new town hall is also not in the NIZ. So I'm trying to think of what critical facilities this would apply to.
We do have Pruitt Health, that's in the NIZ.
Is that in town limits?
Yes.
Okay, so that might be,
Well, they're annexed into the town.
okay. But other than that,
I mean, I haven't scanned all of it, that was just one off the top of my head.
because I think that's a good point, because I was looking at the list today, and I don't think there are that many, but it's worth looking and checking which ones are in the NIZ.
I don't know if our wastewater facility is in it.
I
guess
don't
our-
think the water plant or the sewer treatment plant are in the NIZ.
Yeah, I think they are. I can see it right there. Park.
Possibly the one on Glenda, but not the one by Randolph Johnson.
But still,
Actually, it's not in the blue, it's in the yellow.
We also know that the flood maps will be changing in the next year or two before this document gets adopted, so we also have to look at our preliminary maps to see where those are hitting. So those are a little bit more deliberate and defined as far as the maps are concerned. So also, when you're on the Frizz site, toggle effective and preliminary to really get the full picture of what we're looking at.
and Brian just made a note that part of the sewer treatment site is in the NIZ, but currently, the way that this is written, if any part of the property is in the NIZ, are we basically then stating that that property is in the NIZ and needs to be conforming, or is it only the portion of the property?
Just the section of that
The section
property
of the
is, yeah.
It's different for the structure,
Yeah, it's different for the house.
Yeah, if the
a
structure, if
structure.
part of the structure is in the NIZ, then we consider, like, the regulations for the NIZ would apply to the whole structure. But if it splits the lot, then the NIZ standards apply in just the portion that's NIZ, like Michelle
So
said.
it does apply to the lot then? Okay, so that could be something.
It applies to the portion of the lot in the NIZ. It splits the lot.
Right.
But if a building touches it,
Then it,
you're in trouble.
yes.
It does have the blue on the part of the building. Right.
And the list we have here applies to future development. I don't know that the wording would exempts existing development, existing critical facilities. But it is definitely something to look into.
I'd suggest having some kind of companion document to the UDO that has a bunch of scenarios and like FAQs, just because this institutional knowledge and the people who remember the intent of what we're trying to do, we're all going to turn over at some point, maybe before the next update, and then those people will be left having to figure out the interpretation, even if it's relatively clear, if there's any wiggle room. Has that ever been done, like some type of appendix or companion document that, just goes through a bunch of scenarios and questions and kind of demonstrates the intent and clarifies parts of the unit?
Minutes many times do that, Paula,
Yeah,
seriously.
so I'd recommend doing that.
Yeah, we definitely do see a lot of like administrative manuals that go side by side with the UDO that help either staff and or property owners, developers understand, better understand how you go through the development approval process. FAQs are a great idea, but that's something that we could definitely prepare alongside the UDO.
Is it clear in the document if we have items that help improve permeable surfaces? Have we listed specific items that allow for increased permeability? So like, do we have listed that you can't use this or you can use that, like pavers or porous concrete or so forth, that are considered, that can be utilized, so that there's clarity there?
I'm pulling up another file right now, but I would anticipate that that's in a definition. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I assume the town has a current definition of impervious. Okay. Let me, so what we could do, let's see, impervious. There is a definition in the LDO of impervious surface. Gives some examples. It says those surfaces which do, so it's impervious surface. Let's see if there's a definition of pervious. permeable, capable of being permeated, penetrable, having pores or openings which allow liquids or gases to pass through, often in reference to parking and stormwater. So we can add to those definitions, or like Michelle suggested, maybe cross-reference any state stormwater definitions, because it would make sense to align that, and just, just so that folks are
Yeah, I think it's
aware and
important so people
understand.
know what measures they can use to mitigate that, the requirements, that they can, have, a driveway or so forth that allows for a permeable surface, and what's recommended, or what's a usable item.
Page 200 of the CAMA manual.
Gotcha, okay.
Bucky knows.
Couldn't resist.
Some people think that a gravel driveway is permeable, but it's not.
And I have one other question for Ari. So Ari, I was just reading about other communities that allow for incentive zoning tools and bonuses in places that are sensitive, and allowing for transfer of development rights and so forth, and from those areas, so that landowners could transfer those rights to other locations for higher density credits. Is there anything within the state of North Carolina that allows for such mechanisms?
I think 160D addresses that possibility, and there's some companion provisions under the stormwater statutes that do. You do see that in some jurisdictions, but none locally that I'm familiar with. Perhaps the city of Jacksonville or the city of New Bern allow that, but I'd have to investigate it a little more.
We've had great success with that in other areas.
Okay.
It's a great offset versus someone who feels that they're being down financed. In the area I'm in, they call it development rights. And,
Yes, sir.
And it's extremely meaningful. And the Conservancy steps in and will pay for them. There are lots of interested groups that have distinct on that. So I think I agree with you, John. I think that's something that it would be worthy of taking the time to find out what's allowable in North Carolina law.
You see some of these successes in other areas for conservation easements. I didn't know if that was something that we could look into in our community.
We'll certainly take a look. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And it boils down to money.
Anybody else have any questions?
I've got one other quick one.
Yes, sir.
When John's done.
I don't know.
I'm done.
Okay. Got the one.
I just wanted to double check, because I didn't see it, and it may be in these materials that I haven't looked at as carefully as this one, and that is that the exemption for the urban waterfront redevelopment still is identified in these documents. And that's just a checklist item, if you could.
Yeah, I think it mainly aligns with the historic business district and historic waterfront.
Now, this is the urban waterfront district exemption. It's on page 200 of the CAMA plan. I just want to make sure that it's still here. It's critical on docks. I happen to enjoy it at the other end of Front Street. It's a powerful exemption. It was created by CAMA. It's actually a CAMA exemption. If we could just checklist it, I didn't see it, but I got tired.
I think functionally it's in here, but maybe we need to call it the same thing across the plans, like reference it better to make sure.
So maybe that's how.
Yeah, I think functionally it's in there, but I think we need to call it out for what it is, just to make sure that it's clear.
Thank you. I could never remember the name.
Yeah, we should definitely call it the same thing.
Yes, Mr. Sancio?
Can you go back to the slide that talks about developments and DEQ, that require DEQ?
That's for the impervious surface limit?
Can you explain that a little bit? Because I'm not sure that there's a relation, that, maybe, I might be wrong, and maybe staff can answer this. Is there a relationship between a DEQ permit and density?
So this isn't talking about density, this is talking about impervious
I mean,
coverage.
impervious surface.
Okay, so if you're subject to a state stormwater permit, and we've got in that other section that half of your stormwater has to be taken care of with LID techniques, we said if you have to meet state requirements and you're doing your LID, then you're doing your job to limit your impervious coverage and your impact to the environment in that way. So if you're already having to comply with those extended requirements, then you don't have to meet also this percentage limitation, which you may end up meeting this limitation anyway.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? All right. Do you have any questions for us? Do you feel like you have received good feedback that you can take back to the drawing board, and we'll have this conversation again?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Appreciate your input.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, unless there's any further inputs, I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Thank you for the hard work that everybody has put into this document. We still have more discussions to go. Look forward to seeing as many of you tomorrow for the Q&A panel. And unless I have anything other from anybody else, can I get a motion to adjourn? Got a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.